Greetings and welcome to Gary from the Internet. I'm your host, Gary. I'm going to be talking today with a former classmate of mine by the name of Clayton Platt, and we're going to reminisce about a mutual classmate of ours by the name of Chinky Osborn. So, Clayton, welcome to my show.
So pleased to be on your show,
It's
Gary.
good. It's good to see you, pal. I Uh, for those who don't know, I'm Gary Hodder. I was your classmate for 9 years at Episcopal from, I guess, kindergarten to what we now kind of think back to as eighth grade, but it was, I guess, second form
It was
was
second form. Good
yeah,
memory.
yeah, for sure. And as a million memories come back from that, but um, you asked me to pull together some recollections about our mutual classmate, Chinky Osborn, who's an extraordinary guy. And I've kind of had the opportunity to reflect on Chinky and to think um, what an effect he had on my life at that
Hmm.
time. And of course, we're all so young, we're so little.
Yeah,
We're like about over 60 years ago.
it's pretty
That's not
scary.
this isn't even possible, right? But no, I'm really you know what I'm really happy about? I'm really happy that you, Clady, remember what buds Chinky and I were.
Yeah. Yeah. And Gary, it's really funny because when I think back of sort of my classmates and who was like pals with whom, and in my memory, and maybe this is apocryphal, but in my memory, there was so much that I paired you to. And different class activities, different stuff outside of school, but there was always like this really cool energy. And it was like you two fed off each other. There were things that would interest you, that would amuse you, but there was an energy that would pop up, and a lot of times the whole class could be off doing something, and Chinky and Gary would be like focused, and just involved, but appreciating each other. And that to me, as I look back, it's like that didn't happen all the time with different classmates and relationships, but there was a mutual appreciation, which was pretty stinking cool.
Well, isn't that great? You remember that because at the time, when you're that age, you're not self-conscious. You're not
Yeah,
thinking, how you appear or what you might be like to other people and so on. And but I mean, Chinky, very early going, really, he's somebody who, I kind of looked up to. He was, see, Chinky, he had three older brothers
yeah,
who were quite a bit older than he. He was kind of an
yeah.
afterthought in that family.
Mhm.
Um, and his brothers were, I mean, they were teenagers, like
Yeah,
wow, they were old and sophisticated and mature. They were teenagers, and he was always, very gravely explaining to me that, one thing about being a little brother is it's absolutely important. You leave your big brothers alone. They don't want to play with someone our age. And but you see, and now here I'm imitating him because he
yeah.
he had this patient, explanatory way about him.
Hmm.
And I really, attuned to that, and I depended on him. Like
Hmm.
he had this kind of, I don't know, ambulatory wisdom. It's hard to really explain it, but
No, and Gary, if I can jump in, because I totally get what you're saying. There was He was definitely an old soul. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And the fact that his brothers were so much older than him is a clear explanation of at least part of that. But not every afterthought sibling has the kind of as you said, ambulatory wisdom that Chinky had, and it was very natural. It was like he didn't pontificate. He didn't say, "This is what you need to do. I know this because." It was like he just lived it, and was this example of like being calm and kind of being curious and being in control most of the time. And yeah, that's
Well, that's
and
right.
I
It was
think about
you're right. You hit it right there. Is a kind of a he would explain things, but he would explain in a patient way.
yes,
He had a very like a real patience about him, you know. And
yeah,
I was all excited. My parents, and here I got to tell this story, and I don't remember this happening. This is something I have no recollection of. But it's a story that my dad told, 100 times. It made a big impression on him. It was, when I first went to EA in 1959, I was commuting from Drexel Hill, which is where my dad had a parish. He was a rector of Church of the Holy Comforter in Drexel Hill, and while I was at Episcopal, I guess I don't know how I guess I'm not sure of the whole history, but anyway, he ends up being invited to become chaplain at Episcopal. And he said yes, he'd do that. And so he quit his job as rector of Holy Comfort. He'd been there for 10 years. And he became chaplain, and part of his new job as chaplain was to come and have a little religious service for the kids in Wetherell House, which is where
yeah,
we, of course, Wetherell House was pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, and first grade, which is,
yeah.
G2 form, G1 form, and F form. Okay. So he shows up. And do you remember that? You remember that we had a little choir and we had to
Oh
wear
yeah.
little blue capes, and oh, this is bizarre. Um, so anyway, Dad shows up, and I had been, and Dad always emphasized this, that he had heard so much about my friend Chinky, like, that, oh, this Chinky, I was always talking about Chinky and this about Chinky and that about Chinky and so on. Anyway, he shows up to this little service, and there would have been all of, maybe 25 of us,
Yeah.
something, for this event. Now, um, just the funny part is he came in. Now, he didn't know who Chinky was. He had never met Chinky. There was, in this survey, he was looking out over the little kids that he had in front of him. There was an Asian kid.
Oh no.
And that's thinking, oh, just like his worst fears have been realized. These kids are calling this Asian kid Chinky. He was horrified. So anyway, he didn't say anything or do anything, whatever. And then of course the story goes on that look, finally that we had, it was big on, we were big on play dates back in the day, right?
Right.
Visit people's homes and so on. Um uh and so, Chinky comes over to play one day, and he had this huge relief that it was not the Asian kid.
And Gary, I'm trying to remember. I don't recall the derivation of why Charles Osborn was nicknamed Chinky.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I never really got the backstory on that, or if I did, I forgot it. I mean, his name was, you remember his middle name? He had this impossible middle name, was Sheffelin, and
Oh,
with like more consonants than you can imagine. And and he was Charles Sheffelin Osborn, you see. And there was some story, I don't know if you remember it. His like, he had some great grandfather who was, I don't know, a Civil War general or something
oh
like
yeah.
that. There was some his major historical uh, backstory to him, to his family. But anyway, the now just, you know um, we were in Wetherell House, and then, we move on to the lower, and the lower was two grades, I guess, would have been
Second and
E
third.
form and D form.
Yeah.
And my principal recollection from the lower was we had on the back it was the playground with, and there was an area that had tan bark, if you remember the tan
Yep.
bark, and that was sort of a field. And then as you went out the back on your right, at the far end, there were these enormous logs. Do you remember the logs? I mean,
Yep.
big. They were just, they had no explanation, they had no use, they had no meaning, they had no purpose. They were just big cut logs that just sat
Right.
there.
Yep.
Now, do you remember a thing called mall ball?
Oh, oh, I remember Mall.
I mean, mall ball was this crazy thing, and it went on for years. And
Yeah.
I mean, it purported to be a game, but it really wasn't. It had no rules. It didn't always have a ball.
No. But when it had a ball, it was tackle the person with the ball, and it would be the boy because we were all boys, right? Tackle the
That's
one
right.
with the ball, right?
Yeah, that's
Oh
right.
my God.
But it wasn't like, but it moved out from there because you didn't have to have the ball to get
No, that's
mauled,
right.
right? And this is just ridiculous. And it was a major frenzy, right? When this was
Yeah.
was happening. And like, um, I was always kind of interested in hearing, what Chinky had to say about things. And recess was an opportunity to talk. Couldn't talk during class, so on. And so those logs became very, very important to us because we like would go and we'd stand on the logs because the mall ballers couldn't get you on the logs. You couldn't run on
Right.
the logs. And in fact, you could barely stand on the logs because the bark on these things had come off and they were a little bit slippery.
Yep. Yep.
And so it was kind of like a safe place where those logs.
Yeah.
And I remember being there with this mall ball roiling. So it's a safe place to
Yeah.
speak.
I love that. And just as an aside, Gary, you can definitely edit this out. But if you recall, when we were in Dietrich House,
Yes.
um, or was it middle school? No, I think it was middle school because we kept playing mall ball all the way through middle school. And the sixth and the eighth graders would gang up on the seventh graders.
Oh.
Yep. So it was like sixth grade, you were protected by the eighth graders. Seventh grade, you were on your own. And it was awful. It was awful.
I mean, I'm glad you have a recollection of it because it looms large in my memory.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my God. And also the horrified look on mom's face when I come home, my clothes just completely ripped apart.
Oh yeah.
What
Oh, it was
happened?
it was an absolutely violent game. I mean, there's
It
no
was.
question. But you're talking, you mentioned you know uh, Dietrich House,
Yeah,
and my Dietrich House memory is an important one concerning Chinky because I was always, you and I were just discussing offline before we got going today, and about how I would, you know sort of listen to what Chinky had to say about things. He had, as I say, this patient explanation. And we get into Dietrich House, and in I guess it's B form, our homeroom teacher was a guy named George Pappas.
yeah,
And he was, uh, I mean, I think he was probably a pretty good teacher, but he was also a bit crazed, where he would, I mean, I remember him telling us things like, do you know that, I mean, all of these, back in the day in the movies then were all, there was, monsters, and, you know, uh, there was, this is the beginning of, sort of science fiction movies and
yeah,
creatures from outer space and everything else. He said, do you know, realize, he said, that's all to get us all ready for when we're going to be meeting people from outer space, and when we're, and these sea monsters are going to be, you'd say things like that. And we're like, trying to figure these things out. But there was one time, one time that I recall, and this very much involved Chinky, was uh, Pappas comes in one day and he decides we need to know about Thomas Aquinas. Well, why? I mean, like how? Why? I mean, why is that coming in? I mean, he wasn't teaching us, religious philosophy or anything, but he just decided we need to know about it. And he described how Thomas Aquinas would dictate to his amanuenses, different people scribbling things down, sitting around him, and he, like, they couldn't keep up. Like, he would speak with one person and they'd be scribbling it down, and then he'd be on to the next one, and then on to the next one, on to the next one. He'd go, almost like speed chess or something,
Right.
and that he had just so much to get out that he needed all these people and had them all scribbling at once. And that and just it that made a big impression on me, and it made a big impression, I remember, on Chinky. I remember having a discussion with him about that, and what a thing that was. Like, wow, do you think it's even true? And I've actually since spent some time reading Aquinas. I never found that story.
Yeah.
He may have made it up.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I remember that. It was just one more Chinky story, because we don't want to go on too long. But the and I think we're all agreed. Everybody went through EA in our class. I mean, I think we're all agreed that the best teacher any of us ever had was Dave Baldwin.
Yeah.
I mean, like, just nobody ever could duplicate that kind of instruction. I mean, how much he got into us was unbelievable. And of course, and that year, that was A form. That was our first year in the middle. We had, yeah, I mean, it was like a perfect storm of a learning experience, because not only did we have Dave Baldwin teaching us, but we had two new kids in the class, were Jim Brook and Perry Swope,
Yeah.
who very different people, but I mean, I mean, we're learning, history,
Hmm.
and from Dave Baldwin, and learning about the American Constitution and this sort of thing, and a guy like Jim Brook, very inquisitive, curious, like, like, we had never I had never met anybody who was intellectually curious before in my life.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree.
Like, what a thing is that?
Yeah.
So that was Jim Brook, and then Perry Swope. We're learning poetry again from Dave Baldwin, and like, we had Perry could write poetry, like he could
Yeah.
write it. Like, what a thing was that? And that just got everybody thinking that they could, Um,
Yeah.
and so, uh, and then one day, Dave Baldwin brought into the class. I don't know how he arranged this, but he brought into the class Robert Frost's daughter,
Yeah.
and who spoke to us about her father's poetry with just such passion, and
Yeah.
I don't know what else, but it brought about a connectedness
Mm.
between us trying to learn things, and Robert Frost, who was obviously Dave Baldwin's number one poet
Right.
that
Right.
he had to tell us about. And
Do you remember, Gary, just as an aside, and again, feel free to snip this. Do you remember Dave Baldwin talking about how he had always had a pad of paper with him, and he'd be driving home from school and something would come to his mind and he'd pull off and write it down. And I'll never forget, that was, to me, that was so impactful, because it was like, you can't let these thoughts just disappear. It's like you have an inspiration, you need to get it down. And I was, that blew my mind, that you could have these random thoughts that were so important. You'd pull your car over, and bless his soul, he would pull it over and wasn't trying to multitask
yeah,
away. you
yeah.
know?
Well,
Um,
that's right. Well, I mean, that's a classic sort of kernel of wisdom that fell from Dave Baldwin.
Yeah.
And I mean, we could do another video series about that
Yeah.
class,
Yeah.
how wonderful and marvelous was. But as I say, it was. But it was kind of at that point that I won't say I didn't like cease to be friends with Chinky. We were always solidly good friends. Let's look at some pictures up because I have some here.
Yeah.
Um, and let's see, I have to share the screen. Okay, this is uh, that's it was Mrs. Davies, was it not?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
First
this
grade.
is yeah. So this is I guess F form.
You're
And
so good that you remember those forms. I go straight to the grades, and it's like,
yeah, I
no, is that?
know. But it's kind of how it comes back to me. This so
Yeah.
you've got I mean you're in the front on the far left,
Hmm.
and I'm kind of I guess one, two, three people to the right. In other words, I'm the guy looking like alfalfa with a bad haircut. Um, I was, all the pictures of me in that era, like I've got these really funky, weird haircuts all the time. I don't know how that happened, but and now Chinky, of course, is in the very back,
Hmm.
uh, second from the left, sitting between. I guess that's Danny Bernard and Dick Palmer
Correct.
on one and his face is partially obscured, but it does give you uh that to me is the Chinky Osborn benign smile
Hmm.
that I recall. And what a parcel of rogues we're looking at too. My
Oh my goodness.
gosh. And here he is. This is he's age 9, so this would have been I guess 3 years later. We were I guess 6 in first
Yeah.
grade, so it would have been 3 years later. And
And I recall he
these
was
are
one of the first guys in our class to wear glasses, as I recall.
oh that may be too. Yeah, I don't really have any recollection of that. So there he is playing baseball. These are pictures his brother Pell sent to me. He's was very
By the way, that was a pretty darn good form he had on that swing.
oh, I think, yeah, no, for sure. Look at that. Yeah, no, that's right. And he was a very good athlete, and
Yep.
he and I used to play full back together. That was one of the things
Hmm.
we did together because in those days we used to play a 5-3-2 formation in soccer, and the
Yeah.
two was defending the goal was me and Chinky. Here he is with his dad, um, which it's amazing to see someone who at the time I felt was really really old, and here I look at him and his dad looks like a very young man,
Yeah.
and so this is no this is going to he be age 6 there, and then here's one with his brothers in later years. Now this is after I lost track of them because after second form, that is eighth grade, there was a fairly large exodus to boarding schools, and
Yep.
uh, Chinky went to Brooks Academy in New England, not far from where I was. I was at St. Paul's School, and I would see Chinky, soccer games, because
Mm.
we both played soccer, and he was still playing soccer, and so I'd see him, and I could, renew the acquaintance, um, and he, oh my gosh, I mean, did you see him post eighth grade? Did you have
Well,
occasion to see
yes.
him?
One of the one of the crazy things for me was after graduating from Episcopal and taking what we now call bridge year,
Hmm.
um, where I worked in a factory to save some money for school. I show up at Princeton, and two of our classmates were in the sophomore class. And that two of our classmates that had gone on to move away from the Philadelphia area in the case of Norman Asher and Chinky, who'd gone to boarding school. So I kind of got to know Chinky a little bit more at Princeton and got to see him. He and I were in the Triangle show together.
Oh, you saw a lot of them then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, well, that's great. Well, that what a great thing. I was unaware of that.
Yeah.
And now that you mention it, yeah, you did both go to Princeton. I don't know
Yeah.
how I didn't make that connection.
Well, he deserved to be there.
Yeah. I see. There's a distinction to be made. But the only point I was trying to make was, I mean, you remember how unbelievably tall he got?
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't.
Yeah, jeez. I mean, he was always tall, but then he got really, really tall.
Yeah.
I don't know, 6 foot, whatever it was. I don't know, but anyway, I mean, life went on. I mean, I sort of kept in touch with him. Life. I kind of understood. There he is. I think with his brother. Yeah, that's with his brother Pell.
Mhm.
And then uh, he married. He had, I think, two sets of twins,
Yes.
which is quite a thing. And that's his wife Lynn, I think, on the right, and three of his children, daughters Katie, Sarah, and Ellen. Now I didn't know them. I mean, I guess sort of tuned back into his life when at the age of 46,
Yeah.
he contracted Lou Gehrig's disease and up and died.
Yeah.
Which was kind of a I found a kind of a shocking, horrible thing that, and you know, but I guess it comes to us all, does it not?
Yeah. But not, I had a conversation with him a few years before he died. And for those, I mean, ALS is a pretty miserable way to go. His mind was still there and he was still somewhat able to communicate, but his body wasn't participating, so to speak. And it was just a really, really tough, but he had a beautiful family, you know?
He did, by all accounts. I had some communication with his widow after he died, and but that was the only connection I had. But in any event, I'm really really happy for the experience to reflect on Chinky. Uh, you approached me about doing this some months ago, and my initial thought was, gee, I hope I can come up with enough stuff to fill up a video. And then, but very quickly, as I started to reflect on Chinky and my relationship with him, I would say, the problem is going to be able to keep it short.
Yeah. 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 Wonderful spirit, lots of talent, as you said, because um, we I don't think we saw his athletic talent really develop in middle school. He was sort of a gangly guy, but as you said, when he went off to Brooks, he said became a great athlete, and he also had that musical talent. He had a beautiful voice, um, and an
Yes. Oh, yes.
infectious.
I remember. And that's actually the only time that I, uh, was like out and out. I won't say angry. I'll say I was jealous of him when we got it. We're in lower school and there were tryouts for the choir, and he got in and I didn't. And and now, like, I fully recognize that if anybody is going to be in the choir, it's going to be Chinky. But I kind
Yeah.
of felt that I should be too.
Well, I so appreciate your energy behind this and collecting those pictures and the stories. I I miss that guy. It's been,
Yeah, yeah,
a long, long time, but
yeah. Well, this has been a wonderful experience. And Clady, before we sign off, I just want to say once again how much I appreciate this opportunity and appreciate your interest in hearing about this guy who was, you know, an important part of my life for
Yeah.
years, you know. And so there we are. And
Mm.
thanks again.
Well done. Thank you.
Cheers. Okay, well, that gives me enough time to flip the end of it. And
Yeah.
so there we are. Here I can stop the recording. Greetings and welcome to Gary from the internet. I'm your host, Gary. I'm going to be talking today with a former classmate of mine by the name of Clayton Platt, and we're going to reminisce about a mutual classmate of ours by the name of Chinky Osborn. Greetings and welcome to Gary from the internet. I'm your host, Gary. Today, I'm going to be talking with Clayton Platt, a former classmate of mine, and we're going to talk about a mutual friend of ours, Chinky Osborn.